I will be discussing 100 one-mark questions. The best way for you to revise would be to first answer the questions on your own, then listen to the answers and check your answers. For many questions I have provided additional explanations, but for one-mark questions you do not have to write all that explanation. Your answer should be just in 1 or 2 lines. See, if the charge at Q is positive, then in that case, if you say you have a positive charge Q over here, then the electric field will be in this direction. And you know that the direction of the electric field is along the negative gradient of the potential, which means that the electric field points in a direction in which the potential is decreasing. So points which are closer over here will be at a higher potential, and points which are further away will be at a lower potential. For the first part of the question, when Q is positive, VA minus VB is positive, which means that A is at a higher potential than B. Next, when you have a negative charge, for a negative charge, the direction of the electric field is going to be inwards. So if you have a negative point charge, you have the electric field inwards, which means that once again if you look at these 2 points A and B, the direction of the electric field is towards the decreasing potential. That means B is at a higher potential than A when Q is negative. So in this case, VA minus VB is going to be negative. VA minus VB is negative in this case, and in the first case VA minus VB was positive. See, in this case, the electromagnetic wave is traveling along the Z direction. So, if I consider, say this is the direction of travel of the wave, say I denote it by a K vector, then the electromagnetic wave is traveling in this direction. So, the electric field and the magnetic field both have to be perpendicular to the Z direction. So, the electric field will be along the X direction, and the magnetic field will be along the Y direction. This is the direction of the electric field, and the magnetic field is along the Y direction, since they are both going to be perpendicular to the Z direction. Now, if you are wondering why can't we say that the electric field is along the Y direction and the magnetic field is along the X direction, because the direction of travel of the wave will be given by the direction of E vector cross B vector. So in this case, since this is in the X direction, so I can denote it by an I vector, and this is the direction of travel of the magnetic field, which is a J vector, and I cross J is going to give you K vector, which is the direction in which the wave travels. So if you had the electric field in the Y direction and the magnetic field in the X direction, then the wave would be traveling in the negative K direction. I think if you remember this, say you have I, J and K, and if you move clockwise, now I cross J gives you K, and J cross I would give you minus K, which means the electromagnetic wave would be traveling along the negative Z direction. When a resistance R is connected to a cell of EMF E, then we can write the terminal potential V as the EMF E minus I R. Here small r is the internal resistance and E is the EMF. Now I can be written as V over R. See, in the answer we need to express R in terms of E, V and R. So if you put I in terms of V and R and substitute this into the first equation, you'll get the value of V as E minus V over R times R, and then you can write the expression for R over here. Now let's just take a look at this step once again. You had a cell of EMF E and internal resistance small r connected to a external resistance capital R. So this is small r, this is capital R, and this is the EMF E. And V is the terminal potential difference, which means that is the potential difference between these 2 points, A and B. Now the potential difference between these 2 points A and B, suppose we have a current I flowing in the circuit, will also be equal to IR. So over here we have written the current I as V over R and put in that value into the first equation. Since the given magnetic material over here has a relative permeability which is less than 1, so it is going to be a diamagnetic material. If you have a relative permeability which is greater than 1 but not very large, then it is a paramagnetic material, and for materials that have an extremely high relative permeability, maybe even up to 1000, that would be a ferromagnetic material. See, the wavelength, the de Broglie wavelength is given as lambda is equal to 1.227 over under root V nanometer. Now, see, we will use this formula to plot the value of the de Broglie wavelength as it varies with the potential difference. So, say this is V over here and this is the wavelength lambda. Since this variation can be written as this is proportional to 1 over square root of V. So, we'll have a graph which falls like this, because as V increases, lambda will decrease, and for small values of V, we have a large value of lambda. Now, maybe you need to go back and revise and see how do you get this formula. See, if you recall, the de Broglie wavelength lambda is equal to h by p, where h is the Planck's constant and p is the momentum, which is equal to h over mv. Now, this can further be written as h over root 2 mk, where k is the kinetic energy of the electron. Now, see, over here it is given in the question that the electron is accelerated through a potential difference of V volts. So, the energy acquired by the electron is E times V, the potential difference. And this energy is equal to the kinetic energy of the electron. So, plugging in this value over here, we get the de Broglie wavelength equals h over root 2 m e v. Now, Planck's constant, mass of the electron, charge of the electron are all constants. So, putting in these values, you'll get this value which you get over here as the value for lambda. in a transistor, if the doping level of the base is increased slightly, then the first is the collector current, then the collector current will decrease. That's because the total emitter current is equal to the base current plus the collector current. Now, if the doping level of the base is increased slightly, then the base current will increase. So, if the base current increases, the collector current is going to decrease. And the second part of the question asks for the base current. So, the base current will increase on increasing the doping. So, normally in a transistor, the base is kept thin and lightly doped so that the base current is minimum and the emitter current is approximately equal to the collector current. The term wattless current is used when the circuit is either purely inductive or capacitive. In that case, power which is given by VI cos phi, average power is given by VI cos phi, this becomes 0 because phi is 0. Phi is 90 degrees and cos 90 is 0. So, the term wattless current is used when the circuit is purely reactive, which means either inductive or capacitive. When light travels from one medium to another, it refracts, and the refractive index is given by, let's say it travels to medium 2 from medium 1 by V1 over V2. When light refracts when it enters a second medium, its velocity changes. Now V is equal to lambda times frequency. So when light refracts, its velocity changes and its wavelength changes, but the frequency remains constant. The frequency does not change. Threshold frequency is the minimum frequency of the incident radiation below which emission of photoelectrons is not possible. So, if the work function of the material is denoted by phi naught, then the energy of the incident radiation is h nu. So, this has to be greater than phi naught. That means the frequency of the incident radiation has to be greater than phi naught by h. And this value phi naught by h is the threshold frequency below which there will be no emission of photoelectrons. The first part of the answer, the RMS value, is going to be E naught over root 2. E naught by root 2. And the second part, the average value of a sinusoidally varying AC current, is going to be 0. So, E average is 0. Now, just a little bit of explanation on this, though you don't need to write it in the exam. RMS means the root mean square. Root mean square value. So, to find the RMS value, you need to first take the square, then the mean, and finally the root. Let's say E is equal to E naught sine omega t. Now, squaring this would give us E square equal to E naught square sine square omega t. So, we've done this first step, we've squared this value. Next, we need to find the mean. So, to find the mean of this quantity, to find the mean of this quantity, we'll write this as E naught square sine square omega t and integrate this over time, over the full time period from 0 to t, and then divide this by the time period. Now this gives us the mean value, and finally to get the RMS value we need to take the square root of this value that we get after integration. Now to integrate this, you can see that E naught is a constant, so we need to integrate sine square omega t dt from 0 to t. First of all, we'll use the identity that cos 2 theta is equal to 1 minus 2 sine square theta. So we can write this as half 1 minus cos 2 omega t dt from 0 to t. Now you can take the half outside. So integral, I'll just put a bracket over here. Now integral of 1 dt would be t, and then substituting the limits, so we have t minus integration of cos 2 omega t will be sine 2 omega t by 2 omega, and then we substitute the limits in this from 0 to t. So substituting the limits over here gives us half t minus, now this is sine 2 omega, and when you substitute the upper limit you have omega t. Now you know that omega is equal to 2 pi by capital T, so this would be sine 2 and omega t would be 2 pi, which is sine of 4 pi. Now you know sine n pi is 0, so sine 4 pi would also be 0, and then minus the lower limit. So lower limit would be sine 0, which is 0. So this part will give you 0. So all that you're left with is t by 2. Now coming back to this, E RMS is equal to, we have 1 over t, E naught square is a constant, and this integration gives us t by 2, and then you have to take the root of this. So this gives us E naught by root 2. And when you're finding out the average value, just the average value, then that would be 1 by t integral E naught sine omega t dt from 0 to t, and you can similarly prove that this integration is going to be 0. So this is equal to 0, the average value. Now the same question might have been asked slightly differently. Instead of over a complete cycle, they could have asked you over half a cycle. So what is the RMS and average value over half a cycle? You work this out as a question, and you can write the answers to me and my email ID is leena@tutorbreeze.com.